and welcome to an episode of To the Stars, an Astrology Intuition podcast. I'm your host, Alexander Creek. Today, we're going to be doing another kind of little mixture about what's going on in pop culture that's interesting to me, and looking at it as mixed with astrology, specifically looking at the astrology of the new Charli XCX album and her album Brat. It's very much like moment of the summer, along with like Chaperone for me. So today I'm joined by a special guest, someone that I really enjoyed following their content on TikTok for a long time at this point. They go by Glitzbit on TikTok and Instagram, and their name is also Natalie. I'll probably go back and forth being what I'm going to call you, if that's okay. I am putting your handle in show notes so people can go find your stuff, because it's great content and you do great astrology, and it's always like fun and interesting. And you basically do astrology, anime, and talk about pop culture and kind of essentially what's interesting to you at the time, essentially. Am I getting that correct?
Yes. Mutable niches. Mutable niches would be a success. But, you know, it's all fun. That's what it's all
okay. Exactly. I mean, TikTok is supposed to be fun. And a lot of astrology content, astrologers are yelling at you, I find, or speaking in all caps, or I was just saying to you before we recorded, it's not often I find other astrologers on TikTok that I enjoy watching their content. Partly just because a lot of content is for people like learning about it. I'm like, I want to know, obviously I'm still learning about it, but I don't need to be screamed at about like, oh, if you have Venus in Cancer, this is your soulmate kind of stuff. I kind of, so yeah. I probably should look at my block list on TikTok, because you can't mute anyone. You just have to block them if you don't want to find their stuff. And there's probably good people I just don't follow. So
I have no comment, because my block list is very long for very similar.
Yeah. It's like, I don't need you yelling at me when I swipe. So, but I wanted to ask generally, I wanted to ask about you. And I before we talk about the astrology of Brat and this pop culture music moment that we're in, I wanted to know like about you. And I also wanted to know like how you came to find astrology and kind of what your journey has been like up until this point, like how long you've been practicing and all that kind of stuff.
Right. Well, I don't think that there is a point in my life that I wasn't aware of astrology in some way. My first astrological book was What's Your Sign? A book for young astrologers. It was like purple and very cartoony. Yeah. My mother actually purchased a natal chart for me when I was born. So I've always had a copy of my birth chart. Wow. Yeah, so it's something that I've always been very interested in, been spiritually curious about, but for a lot of people, I didn't seriously start studying until 2020. They seriously practicing and studying astrology, particularly Hellenistic traditional, since 2020, so for about 4 year.
Okay, cool. Well, it definitely seems like, I don't know, I'd say a little faded to some degree. Like, because can I ask, like, how old are you? I'm 35, so it wasn't that common to get that when I was little.
Yeah, I am 31.
Okay. So we're
around the same age range. My parents are a little, I wouldn't say they're woo-woo, but they're definitely very open to curiosities. So it's like, when it came to spirituality, to religion, I was definitely given the sandbox, and that was just one of the tools that I guess I was kind of given when I was younger, which is kind of nice.
Okay. That's cool. Yeah. I love that. Okay. I've always liked your mind, and I will, and you do this too. I was like, man, she always reposts my stuff. It's always been so nice. I was like, because I was just like, we need to talk, like, that's a girly, like, so... but also we have that, I'm Scorpio rising. If you don't mind, will you share your big three, at least for people listening?
So I am a Cancer rising, Scorpio moon, and a Sagittarius sun, and Sagittarius Mercury. That's not really obvious, but yeah.
Yeah. I was going to say, because I was actually doing laundry, and I was like, I think she's Cancer rising. I was like, am I going to interview my ex-boyfriend? And I was like, no, he had moon in Aries and a slightly different Mercury, but yeah.
Still there.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and you talk a lot about, and before we get into it, you your other kind of your big kind of I would say one of your obsessions, it seems to like not just that seems pretty fixed, is what's the anime that you continually discuss on your TikTok? Like
Jujutsu Kaisen. So
okay.
Yeah, it's astrology, but also news / commentary. It's
Yeah.
Yes, Jujutsu Kaisen. Unfortunately, for me, I do have to read it on a weekly basis, and it is very painful, but wonderful.
Yeah,
wonderful community. But
absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, yeah, I think because I did a Baldur's Gate 3 astrology episode last week, and I was like, this is for five gays out in the world who are listening to this.
Well, yeah. The thing I loved about that episode, and the thing that why I think utilizing pop culture and astrology is because these are archetypes that we're working with. And a lot of these creative archetypes have lineage to the same archetypes that astrology uses. Everything is a remix. We're all pulling from the same creative like sandbox, like I said. And the Baldur's Gate episode was wonderful with distilling that out. And that's what I try and bring with my anime astrology content, in particular with Jujutsu Kaisen. Some series aren't as, I would say, narratively rich, where you can't really map it out as much. But with something like Jujutsu Kaisen, there's a lot of overlap and a lot of connections. And I really do strive to make people be curious. You know, it's great to love these like pieces of media. It's also important to critique them. It's great to love them, but also to use them as stepping stones into learning other things. So
yeah, I mean, especially if you're, I mean, I think we're more than astrology pilled at this point. It's like fully sunken into ourselves, you know? And so, I mean, pretty much everything. And for a long time, that was to be with numerology, because that was the first thing I ever learned was numerology. So do you know your life path number, by the way?
7.
Oh, okay. Yeah, there it is. I love it. Yeah. The researcher, the specialist, someone with a lot of depth and like beauty of the mind. Yeah, I have a lot of 7 in my chart. That's my expression number.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's cool. So for a long time, that's kind of how I looked at the world, was like, because, you know, my brain is going to be continually kind of like obsessing with this topic. It's kind of switched over to astrology probably since 2020. I mean, I've been learning it for longer than that, but like it's like at that point it was like, I think this is something I need to take seriously, because I started thinking about things in terms of like, where is your rising sign and where is the full moon happening in your chart, and I kind of went from there. So but I agree with you. So especially with looking at what was going on in pop culture news this weekend, or like, I mean, really all through June, but especially this last weekend, because we were talking about, I wonder what's going to go on in Charli XCX's chart when there's the full moon in her 7th house of partnership. And there's this insane collaboration that we're going to discuss. So let's kind of start from square one and talk about, so I knew about Charli, you know, as a just as a general gay guy who just like knows about music. But so let's talk about kind of why we're here. So let's talk about the astrology of one of the biggest pop cultural music things to come out in a long time. For me, I wasn't that aware of Charli going into it. Like I mentioned, I was like, I generally just know stuff because I'm interested in pop culture and just very gay. So, but for me, her music for a long time was like, sometimes as a Virgo moon, I fear I am just sort of irritated by things until I'm fully sort of discovered them, you know, for no reason. And I just wasn't super into it. I just knew that she was underground for a long time. But I feel like you have been a major stan for a while, if I'm putting that together correctly.
I would classify myself as an angel, which is base name. I've been a fan of Charli XCX probably since, you know, her first big hit, of course, Boom Clap, but Fancy with Iggy Azalea. I love it. Iconopop, which were her first like kind of mainstream crossover like hits. Not all of them were her by herself, but besides the singles, I really enjoyed Nuclear Seasons, which was really like that Tumblr era of just kind of like that Tumblr girl emo type of music almost. Not emo in like a classic sense, but just like sad girl Tumblr music. She was...
Is that like 2014 era, like Skyfall era? Solange.
Lana, Marina and her former all of that era. It was like kind of all lumped together. So I really did enjoy Charli, and of course we'll talk about Lorde. And then around the same time, Lorde, Pure Heroine came out, followed by Melodrama. And I have followed Charli, although I kind of went in and out of certain albums that I appreciated more. And when she really entered this hyper pop space that she's been operating in for a number of years and a number of albums, that's when it really like clicked that she was really cultivating something new and something very distinct and different, which I always really enjoy about music, about her in particular.
Was Crash... When did Crash come out? Because that feels... I've heard like that is most similar to Brat. Am I wrong in that? I might be wrong.
Last album. Okay. And Crash was 20. I think it was 20. It was last summer, so 22.
Okay.
Oh gosh, no, that was 2 years ago. Time doesn't matter. It was her last album, and Crash for me has some similar things to Brat, but it was definitely more like pop, like definitely safer in a lot of ways, but I still really enjoyed Crash. That's actually what I regret not going to the Crash tour so much.
Because from what I remember, I think because she's sort of been outside the mainstream for so long, that was like it was a very self-aware attempt to be like main pop girl, and also just be like, is this what you want? Like, you know,
it was definitely trying to like play it to actually, I think about it this way. We're gonna tie in Gaga. So Gaga, I am also a little monster.
Absolutely.
Art pop was supposed to be so vulnerable and so not art pop. Joanne was supposed to be so vulnerable, and her coming out and saying this album is all about me. It's all about like my personal life, very personal. And it took me a while to be interested in Joanne. And a lot of critics said, this seems very, like, it's not a bad album, but it's definitely not vulnerable or personal in the way they're marketing this. And then Chromatica came out. And it's like, that went triple platinum in my household. But
absolutely.
In a way that Joanne was really trying to do. And I can see a similar story with how Crash was really trying to be that more mainstream, kind of going back to Charli's, not her roots, but maybe more of that like boom clap style, where that had a lot of success, mainstream success. Same with Fancy and Iconopop. Of course, those were kind of collaborations with other artists. But Brat seems to have done what Crash was trying to do, and Crash was very commercially successful for her. It was her I think it was her highest commercially successful album, and Brat has moved past that. So it's similar. It just, the authenticity about it, I think there's something there to be said where you can't manufacture that. You have to be yourself.
No. I will say really quick, I feel like anytime a pop artist is like, this is my most personal album yet, you're probably not going to get actually what they're advertising. When Britney released Britney Jean, that was the tagline was, and I was like, she was maybe vocally singing on half of that album. You know what I mean? So so
smell it. People can smell when something's not authentic. And when you have to project and say, this is so authentic, this is so raw, you're planting that in the seed, I think, of the consumer of like, but is it? You might be able to trick some people, but not everybody.
Right. So Charli is 31, and let's actually talk about her astrology a little bit, just generally speaking. So she's Cancer rising. So we have Cancer rising twinsies here. So ruled by her moon in Virgo, and she has a stellium in Leo. She has a Leo sun. What I noticed looking at her chart today was I noticed that her Mercury is in Leo, it's retrograde, and it's pretty combust. It's like really close to the sun. It's getting burned up by the sun. So Mercury, planet of communication, expression, and like when it's being burned up by the sun like that, especially like this kind of retrograde moment, it's kind of giving me the feeling of like sort of taking a long time for one's sort of voice to maybe fully emerge like it has recently. It's kind of what I was getting from it. Does that make sense to you?
It totally makes sense to me, especially when you have that opposition from her Saturn. Coming, her Saturn is also retrograde. No, excuse me. It is retrograde in Aquarius. And Saturn, of course, has a lot to do with delays. So having that delay in getting your message across, to really like solidifying, who you want to be. Her Mercury is also in the second house of Leo, of the performer, and Leo deals with material success, your resources, and your self-esteem. These are things that make you feel like comfortable. Like money makes people feel comfortable. People feel safe. Self-esteem is also tied into that, in my astrological opinion. And with a singer, with a performer, finding your voice is a big part of how you're going to sustain your fame. And to your point, it has taken a long time. She, I would say, is classified as a very niche artist. She is a pop artist. She's in the pop sphere, but she has always just been orbiting around trying to kind of make those moves and break through for a number of years. And it's very, I would say, open about that, especially, and we'll talk about on Brat, but just in general, I think that's kind of always been the joke. It's like, oh, when is it going to be Charli XCX's time to really hit the mainstream?
For the locals, why is everyone so hyped about this album? And why is it such a moment to you? Because it's like a major moment right now.
Yeah. I think that's a really difficult question to answer, because Brat is a lot of things, because it was designed to be, I think, very customizable and very memeable. And I think that is honestly why it has kind of taken off and turned into this, Brat girl summer. Brat killed, Brat all of the time. We're all just living that life, really. But the thing that I think makes Brat so special is that Charli, in my opinion, has always been someone who's very vulnerable and very authentic, but she's really being so sure in herself of being so unsure. Does that make sense? Does that come across?
Oh yeah.
Especially in her career. I feel like she's always had a very close relationship to her fan base. And a lot of artists, you would have this, everyone's close to their fans, but some people are a little bit more hands off, or they have more of a cultivated and I would say calculated relationship to fans, where I think Charli has always been very on the same level. There's always been these boundaries, but I'm thinking of the album that she produced, that was released in 2020, and I'm going to have to look up the album name because I'm a horrible fan right now. How I'm Feeling Now, which was released in 2020. Yes. And a lot of that was direct collaborations with her fan base, through Zoom, through online spaces, going live. And it really, she distills a sense, I think, of existential dread and vulnerability in a way that a lot of her peers just can't get. And I think it is because she, like I said, is in the pop space, but she's really kind of been on the peripherals for a long time. And you get to see a space very differently when you're outside looking in, but you're still very okay with that. And I think what makes Brat so special is Charli is okay with being who she is and having her own lane. And
aren't you guys the same age?
We are the same age. So we were born. She's a little older than me. We were both born in 1992. She survived and escaped the horrendous Cancer Mars retrograde of 1992. Many of us survived.
Oh shit!
Okay. Included. But yeah, no, we were born the same year. She's a few months older than me.
So you have Mars. Do you have a retrograde Mars and Cancer natally in your chart? Oh, gotcha.
It's right on my ascendant.
Yeah, that's my ruling planet minus the retrograde-ness.
Right.
It's
right.
Yeah. So okay.
Well placed. Okay.
Yes. Oh my God. Okay. I did not know that. That's my condolences. I hope has yours what is yours by progression? Is it still Cancer? I guess it would be since it was retrograde.
Oh, yeah, no, my Cancer Mars does not actually leave Cancer until I'm 59. It's,
Okay.
it's retrograde. It's when I was
Yeah.
born, it was pretty much freshly retrograde.
Okay. Okay. Gotcha. Well,
Watch it.
okay, because I know you have. That's why I was like, wait a minute. And as soon as I asked it, I was like, no, it's not going to be anywhere near it.
No,
So
no, no. It's
my
still a good
apologies.
time.
So
Honestly, I've had many ways for me to look on the bright side of it, and there is actually some nice mitigation in my chart. We won't go into that because it's not me.
Okay. Yes.
But I was born the same year as Charli, and there is that, what I really appreciate about Charli is, again, always being authentic. And I think Leo's in general as an archetype, the Leo archetype gets that sense of being authentic. There is a just inherent sense of like, I am who I am, and that's perfectly okay. And if you don't like it, then you're just not for me. And maybe that's a fire, sign element of having a fire sun. There is something inherently just so delicious and so assured about that. And I think that's what makes Brat special, as well as other people, other artists, other celebrities in pop culture naming Charli and saying, Charli has really been at the forefront of a lot of these like pop trends for many years, and she just hasn't been given her praise or her flowers in a way until I would say pretty recently. I mean, Crash had a lot of really great singles and had a lot of success, like I said, but we really didn't get this same like celebration of Charli. And I think having her releasing her album after the onslaught from the spring, everybody else has kind of released and dropped their bombs. They're all waiting to either get in before Taylor Swift or get in after. And I think she came in at a really great time to really highlight this fun pop summer album. On top of that,
sorry.
No, you go ahead.
I was gonna say it feels messy but self-assured in like this perfectly in this perfect way, and you made a good point. Like the pop girls are releasing this year. A lot of us are tired. We're like, it's been hard to keep up because
it's a recession, babe. It's almost like we're needing to get all this money in.
Yeah, seriously. So the fact that she was able to, I mean, she almost went #1, which was a huge deal for her in the UK. She was like just short of that spot, essentially. Right. And would have had it if not for the multiple variants of Taylor Swift's album, I think, essentially, right. Which again, I think plays into that. We'll talk about this in the transits, but that Saturn activation, I think, at that time kind of made sense of that. Mm-hmm. Do you want to talk about should we talk about the astrology of that album coming out, or is there anything else you wanted to mention about, I think, Charli's chart before, or just generally?
Just touch on a couple more things about Charli.
Please do.
Because I was really looking at it today, and she has a Virgo moon, and like you have a Virgo moon, and God bless you. A little bit of some neuroses, I get it. Some anxiety, and I think anxiety and existentialism is a common theme that I've picked up on in Charli's music. And on top of that is a third house moon, and in her chart, because Virgo is in the third house, and Virgo in the third house deals with commuting. It deals with communication. Virgo is a sign ruled by Mercury. It is quite mercurial. So communication, writing, but also movement, and because it's the third house, driving, short distance travel, and cars.
Oh, I forgot about that. You made a really good point with this before. Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Cars, the driving and being in a car and driving fast, that is it's a joke at this point. It's like she can't go long without singing about something. I was shocked. The most shocking thing about this album is that it took until Apple for her to make some sort of car reference or to have some sort of car sound effects in the song.
Wow.
That's Apple, by the way.
That's restraint. I feel like that is some major restraint on.
Yeah. And with the moon, the moon is instinctual, and it is emotional comfort, your emotional body. And so, when I see this third house moon, and I see it in Charli's, music and in her chart, is just this emotional security when leaning on that car energy, that car imagery. On top of that, she has Jupiter in her third house in Virgo, which kind of just makes bigger like this communicative and fast-paced writing style. You know, her songs are for the most part quite quick. Of course, she has, you know, some of the slower lo-fi ballads, but I mean, it's like very overstimulating. There's a lot going on in the production. And I also plugged in Apollo, the asteroid, and she has Apollo at 0 degrees of Virgo, right in her 3rd house. And Apollo, of course, is an asteroid that deals with music, deals with creativity. And again, just leaning on that, you know, the writing part of it and the vulnerability and just, again, that movement that really
I just saw a TikTok today of someone being in like,
that's what inspired me to plug that in.
Okay,
the Delphi Cave.
Explain.
Yes. So if you haven't seen it, if you're not Brat pilled like us and just chronically online, I did touch grass today. Don't worry. Somebody was in the cave of the Delphi Caves in, I don't know the location. I mean, Greece somewhere.
For sure.
And was playing club classics, I think. And, and you know, this ties in with the Muses, with Apollo. And this is the asteroid that we're talking about. Pretty much every archetype in astrology relates to Greco-Roman myth. Well, Greek myth, but we all know what the Romans did.
Right.
And this is tying again back to Apollo and just having this connection to artistry, to singing, to creativity, but also to healing. You know, there is some healing aspect to the Apollo asteroid. And to me, it seems like Charli works out her own pain, her own inner turmoil through her artistry, which not an uncommon practice.
Well, and it does feel very telling also. Like, do you work with Chiron at all? Somewhat.
Yes.
Yeah,
and Chiron in her 2nd house, again, tied to her success. And that's the wound that you'll never be healed from.
And completely conjunct her Mercury. Like, I think Chiron's at 11, her Mercury's at like 10 or something, so really close. And Mercury in her chart, I mean, you know, she's ruled by that Virgo moon. And then if you take it further, that Virgo moon ruled by that Mercury in Leo. So
exactly.
Yeah. So I love that. So I was like, because I was like, I just saw that twink jumping up and down in that cave today, and I was like, wait a minute, Apollo. I was like, that's really quick. Okay, cool. Anything else with her chart that you noticed? I kind of just have her major stuff. But I don't have anything to add besides that.
The last thing that I'll touch on is just that Gemini Mars in her 12th house, which we'll talk about. This is the perfect transition into talking about the transits. But Mars is all about aggression. It is about dominance, assertion, cutting, severance, anger, really. And I mean, in Gemini, it is a little frazzled, a little everywhere. It comes in twos, comes in waves. And in the 12th house, it's a hidden process. It's very internalized, which can be very difficult. But again, relying on utilizing those Martian themes towards communicating them in a way that is not passive, but making the internal external in a really private way, which I feel like that's very indicative of songwriting and of recording music, because a lot of the time the artist is producing these albums, producing these songs, in solitude or in a very tight circle in private. And I will say that the production of Brat started with her creating a burner account on Instagram.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, the Brat 360. This is like her burner IG account. It's private now, but she started posting about Brat, I think in August of 23, and really giving some behind the scenes look to her diehard fans, posting lyrics, posting ideas, answering Q&As, like this really pulling back the curtain a little bit. But again, this is a private account, so she would go she would unprivate it briefly, and if you got in, you got in, and then closing the door again.
That's
And
cool.
I guess
Wow.
it's a 12th house thing of like being the 12th house is secrets, retreat.
And Mars in 12th house ruling her 10th, as well as her 5th. Her 5th house of self-expression, her 10th house of career for anyone listening. That's fascinating. And also just like that, not that Mars in Gemini is erratic, but I feel like when you are looking at like having your moon in a mutable sign, your Mars in a mutable sign, it does kind of give this feeling of like suddenly kind of working on something in private, like just, yeah, I love that.
Getting it done.
Yeah, totally. Wow, that's really cool. I just I'm not really, as you said, like as I mentioned before, I'm not quite an angel at this point. I mean, I'm working my way toward it, but I wouldn't rightfully claim to like fully stand someone unless I really knew all of like the lore. You know what I mean? So yeah, so okay, that's great. Damn. All right. I think that might be. Let's talk about the astrology around the release and kind of what was going on with her like around this time. So okay, so where should we start? So she's 31. She's in an 8th house perfection year, which we I think we both kind of mentioned it on TikTok already, but I always thought it's kind of interesting. It's also just I guess I wanted to start with that of just the 8th house stuff. An 8th house being like, yes, other people's resources, but it also seems to be this house of like deeper psychological, like working through stuff. Right. And there's a lot of shit to be worked out on this album. It's like it's whether it's being worked out through like doing bumps of cocaine or something or actually processing it, like I love it. Again, that's why it's interesting to me. So yeah. So I guess let's start there. Or what do you want to start with what is going on with her astrology at the time?
Yeah, well, like as you said, being in a Saturn ruled year that's very tough. Saturn is just in general a tough cookie. Delays, growing older, time, moving on. And for Charli, Saturn rules her 7th and her 8th house, which she's engaged right now, very indicative of big like life moves and maturing, especially post her Saturn return. Her Saturn was in Aquarius, and thank God we're done. Saturn return. It's
congratulations.
Like, it's been free. I'm free. I've been in, we've both Charli and I, since we're Cancer rising, have been in the clutches of Saturn ruling our year and being our time lord. So it's like, it is a cosmic joke, just a little bit, but it's fine.
Well, also, are you both night charts as well?
Yeah, we are actually. Yeah. So Saturn is extra rude.
Right. Yeah. I have Saturn and Capricorn day chart privilege, so I kind of don't get y'all sometimes. I'm just like, I don't get it. It's like, whatever, get over it.
Whatever, get over it. Yeah, for not in the know, Saturn is our malefic of sect. So it's extra malefic because he does super well at night. Whereas for people born in the day, Mars is more of the problem planet. But there's some positives too. If you're a night charter, Venus is extra benefic for you. And if you're a day chart, Jupiter is extra benefic for you. So just a little lovely thing about sect. We love that. We love her.
Yes. Just a little tidbit. But anyway, continue.
But Saturn, being ruled in a year, or Saturn ruling her upcoming year, I think has more to do with background things, because the 8th house is like the 12th, kind of secretive. These are behind the scenes things, money things that you're not going to see. Whereas, we want to hear the pop star do the thing. Right. But the thing about Charli and about Brat, I think in general, is, as I mentioned, this rollout has kind of been behind the scenes, and the allure of it is, if it's cool, it's coming down the pipeline. And just this, like, the Brat build has been going for a number of months, with her first Boiler Room set, Party Girl, in February, where she did a DJ set in NYC in Boiler Room, or in the Boiler Room, excuse me. And again, it was a very small venue. People knew that Brat was coming out, but this hype kind of organically built organically. It was marketed, but it was marketed very, very well in a way that felt organic. And I think, again, that kind of plays to the 12th house theme surrounding this album.
Yeah.
And this album was released on June 7th, 2024, right after the Gemini new moon.
Yes. That's fascinating to me because that Gemini new moon, like I can almost hear myself talking about it. Like when I was doing content for it at the time, it was like very busy, right? And that new moon was that new moon essentially bona fide because it was co-present with Venus and Jupiter, both of these planets that kind of want to bring, blessings and affirm you essentially. And it was accompanied by Mercury in Gemini as well. So, and this album is like very busy. Like there's just a lot going on with it. And, I think also with this, all of that kind of lining up in that 12th house, essentially. And the biggest thing one of the biggest things for me that I saw was Jupiter had kind of Jupiter planet of expansion had freshly gone into Gemini, into her natal 12th house, and had conjunct her Mars at the time. And Mars ruling her 10th house of career. So it just felt like this, even though it's happening in this sort of hidden place in her chart, it feels like it's like, here's this like loud kind of explosion essentially going on. So anyway.
No, absolutely. You're absolutely right. And just again, this kind of rollout of the album had been a little understated, had been a little under wraps, Even I remember when the album art was released, people were like, is this a joke?
Yeah.
It's just green and it's like pixelated letters. It's not a picture of you. And, there was some conversation online of like, you're not owed a gorgeous cover shoot of your favorite like artist. Like things can be minimalistic and like it's fine, right? You're not owed this like idealized version of a woman. And everything about Brat was almost manufactured to be just exactly what you're saying. Like it was just, I'm trying to like collect my thoughts. Like,
yeah, go for it. Your process is great, by the way, because I'm just like you're very studied in the lore of Brat. So I just want to say like thank you.
You make me cry.
I'm throwing flowers at you right now.
Hey, I'm catching them. I'm catching them all the way over here in Kentucky, not Texas. But the thing about Brat, it's like it did kind of take some people by surprise, and I think that everyone's success and the longevity of it is very interesting because as we've talked about with Gemini, it does come in twos, and with Jupiter being right there during that new moon, magnifying like those Gemini qualities. So really making these like the waves of new people coming into like the oeuvre of Charli XCX. And after listening to Brat, like, oh, I want to listen to all of these albums.
Yeah.
And kind of this like frenetic sound. We mentioned like all of the planets in early Gemini at the time of the new moon and the release of the album were very close to her natal Mars, which rules her 10th house of career, but also her 5th house of creativity and of parties. And this is a very party album. I mean, everything that Charli's aesthetic has always been party girls, loud, big sounds, big like music, but very forward thinking. Aries rules her 10th house of career. And being the first one to attempt to do something new it takes a lot of courage. And that's what I really love about an Aries midheaven. It's like, this is where you're going to see the innovators. And Charli's sound is very innovative. Yeah. And Brat is innovative.
She has Pisces midheaven also. So it'd be like 10th house Aries with that Pisces midheaven, barely into Pisces. I actually, I had the birth time like 3 minutes off and it went right into 29 degrees of Aquarius, which I could also see because that would be activating her midheaven this year. But yeah, just really quick. I was just like, oh yeah. Cause there was I think we talked about, I want to mention one more thing. The new moon was also square Saturn at the time.
Yes.
And that all that Gemini stuff scoring Saturn and Pisces, immediately comes to mind as this sort of like tangling with that like emotional messiness, frankly. And then also, that was kind of like the main thing. But I also noticed too, which I talked about a little bit before, but transiting Saturn in the sky is opposing her natal Jupiter at this time as well. Yeah. So, which can be, Saturn being her most like quote unquote like malefic planet, like most like difficult planet. There is that sort of like when Saturn is sort of opposing your Jupiter, like a cookbook description is sort of like consolidating resources essentially. And it's not necessarily like sky's the limit, here's your dream. However, though, there are these sort of mitigating factors in the fact that like Jupiter rules her midheaven, her public image, her career house, how she seemed very similar to like, 10th house themes that we discussed before. It almost just kind of feels like here she is, like there's no more, like, I mean, not that there's no more evolution, but it just feels like this is very clearly like, here's what this artist like represents, I guess,
Right.
So especially because it's falling through her across her ninth and third house, which is sort of like communication and like publishing essentially. Anyway, I just went on my diatribe. I don't know where I interrupted you, but I just was like
That's great. Well, the other thing about Saturn, and that just came to mind, because of course we always think of Saturn as like Saturn is a bummer. I don't like when people try and say like, oh yeah, well there's some great things about Saturn. Saturn is still a bummer first and foremost. But Saturn also rules authority and high standings. And I would say that Brat has really brought some high standing in her career. That does come with restrictions because, entering a new like kind of bubble of notoriety and fame, I'm sure does bring a lot of differences. She speaks on the album feeling like she's 1 foot in, fame and 1 foot in normal life. She's perfect for the background. Again, circling fame and being in the peripheral. So she could, I would assume, still go and like grocery shop and not get mobbed like some of her contemporaries maybe. So kind of pushing somebody in kind of that next level of fame does restrict you from everyday life, or can. Again, this is just from, thinking about Saturn as bringing restrictions if you're at a higher level.
Right. That's a good point. And I gotta say, her getting mobbed is at this point will be by like the gays and girlies in the know. Just some sort of like insane twink that's gonna bother her, like at the grocery store.
The Brat Ball concert, I think, was definitely like, Saturn is a controlled, authority. It's a controlled like energy. And so her having a sort of concert at the Brat Wall before the album rolled out in New York, just tweeting the address, showing up, dancing on that car, surrounded by mobs of her, dedicated fans. That can like be an indication. And, like, again, like it's touched on in the album, a lot of fame is orchestrated. The paparazzis are called. Things are put in place to make somebody seem, I don't know why my camera just did that. There we go.
I know, that was very shady of your camera.
Yeah, okay, we're just going to show my whole bookshelf and my like half of my kitchen. Whatever. You're in frame for a reason. Exactly. Everything was very orchestrated. It's not like I spent 30 minutes just doing the right frame. You're going to ruin it.
Exactly.
But fame is orchestrated. And again, as amazing as this album rollout and the marketing around this album has been and how authentic and vulnerable it is still orchestrated. It is still strategized. And Gemini, again, in that 12th house, which is just a signature of this album, Gemini is very strategic and thoughtful, but it's very quick and frenetic at the same time. Thinking on the feet. And that's what Brat gives to me. It's like really tapping into the zeitgeist in a way that some people can't predict.
Yeah, and you cannot pay a marketing firm to have that same kind of energy. You just can't. Like, I mean, we've seen that like so many times with someone trying to like make like a big rollout and like nothing really happens. It's just like a very, I mean, it is orchestrated, but it's also like, it's a completely organic also feeling to me too, of like, you can't really replicate that at all, you know?
Right. The memeability of Brat too. And I think,
Yeah.
again, that album cover, you know, it is, I mean, it's just that green and it's that pixelated letters. But even then, it's like that green. You look at this green, what do you think?
Right.
This is my Brat Mike, okay?
Did you notice, or I don't know, is Pluto in Aquarius? So Pluto moving out of Pluto moving out of Capricorn. So she's had Pluto in her seventh. I mean, like many cardinal signs, you have had Pluto, that planet of power, of death, of transformation, on your necks since 2008. So moving into another sign, I mean, you as a Cancer rising, have you noticed like a difference, just Pluto being in a different sign where it's like averse to your rising? Or I'm just, you know, and I am wondering if Pluto moving into Aquarius for her is a sort of like, you know, it's not making, I don't think it's making any sort of like major mathematical like transits to her chart at the moment, but I am wondering if that is also a little bit of a factor of this like emergence of like, here's the identity, you know what I mean? Or like just completing that really long cycle. I don't know if you had any thoughts around that, but I just noticed that as we were talking.
I can certainly see that. And, you know, I don't want to speak too personally as somebody that's also going through those transits and not projecting my own personal transits onto someone I don't know, which at least not in the way that I would know a regular person. But I can certainly see that relationships with other people, because the seventh house is all about partnerships, and that's business partnerships, that's romantic partnerships, that's open enemies, all of those things. Those are all three of those things are constant themes throughout Brat. You know, romantic partnership, she's engaged to the drummer from the 1975, George. And Sophie, a business collaborator of hers for many years, unfortunately passed away a number of years ago. And I mean, what is there to say other than just like a horrendous loss? And just anytime I think about Sophie, it is truly sad. We would not have Charli in this version without Sophie's influence. Sophie was an amazing producer and collaborator with Charli, which is in her seventh house of business partnerships. So these areas, these arenas of relationships being transformed throughout all of this time, you know, there is a lot of powerful relationships that I personally, as a Cancer rising, have had to deal with and dealt with from 2008 until now. And Pluto feeling kind of heavy moving through that seventh house, but powerful waves and relationships that continue to grow and kind of bring you to the zenith of who you need to be, or who you want to be, I suppose you can say.
Yeah.
Seventh house, I'm a person of the mind of, you are great, but you're not great without a really wonderful team. And the seventh house is the people closest to you who are going to aid in your success. And Pluto moving out of her seventh house into the eighth can kind of indicate coming to terms and finding those groups around her that bring her success, in personal, in business, and in open enemies. I mean, again, we'll talk. Girls So Confusing. But even just being open about communicating about those power struggles that you'll have with those relational, you know, areas in your life.
Okay. Good points. I just was like, that has to be something. I mean, you know, but it's generally like, if you are listening to this and have Capricorn or Cancer rising, like there is this major, you know, I mean, also to some degree Aries in Libra as well. Just Pluto moving out of those major angular houses, I think is like something I haven't personally experienced. You know, I'm Scorpio rising. I think, where's Pluto for me right now? Why can I not think at the moment? You know what? I'm not even gonna fully get into it, because I was just like, I'm gonna talk about myself, and I'm like, actually, like, I'll wait for like next week to do that. So I guess anything else before? Do you want to get into? Did you have some thoughts on like the release around the deluxe stuff?
Yes. So
Okay.
while the release of the album happened on Friday, June 7th, this was originally I believe it was a 14 or 15 track album. And there were a few songs that were teased earlier in the spring that we didn't get. And a lot of people were like, where's the rest of this? Like, what are we going to get bonus tracks? What's going on? So after Brat was released, the Brat wall, which she originally used to kind of promote the album, it was a wall in New York City, was painted white. And we're like, oh, well, the Brat wall's over. The album was released, whatever. Charli went live on TikTok and they were repainting the Brat wall, and they ended up painting the album art for the Deluxe, which is, again, just a blank, well, it's not blank, but it's a white background with pixelated text. It says Brat, and there's 3 more songs, so it's the same, but it's not. And that's the name of the Deluxe album. Again,
which I love so much.
It's so good. It's so good, and just at the same time, not at all. And it had three bonus songs that didn't make to the full cut of the album, and I definitely see why. But they're all 3 great songs. I think the original cut of the album, I can see why they were left on the cutting room floor and released as bonus tracks. Not because they're bad, but just thematically, there was a flow. There's a flow to Brat that just works. And by the time that she had released the deluxe version, which was June 10th, I believe. Yes, I think so.
Yeah, it was.
The sun, or the moon, excuse me, had moved into Leo. So as the album was originally released, everything was in her 12th house, which is kind of I would not say that astrologers be like, yeah, you should do something really big when everything has the skies in your 12th house.
Yes.
Where you're thinking about the 12th house deals with ideas that are like, existentialism, retreat, mental health, mental anguish, really like kind of things that we don't want to talk about in polite company. And these were all themes with the album, her being very open about, her barriers with her career, her paranoia when it comes to other women in her life, especially, dealing with jealousy, with romantic partners. But there was a lot of joy, of course, and, exploration of, romantic rose-colored glasses. Like this album is very, it's everything all at once. But as the deluxe album was dropped, the moon, her chart ruler, had moved into her 2nd house in Leo, highlighting her sun, her Mercury, Venus, and putting a view of herself back into view. And with the moon just being so important to the everyday movement of the chart, it's a trigger point. Wherever the moon is moving, it can kind of activate certain parts of the chart so quickly because it spends about 2 days in each sign. So her releasing the deluxe, coincidentally, as the moon moves into Leo, it just was too perfect. It just seemed like, again, it's one of those moments where you're like, these people have to have astrologers on staff. But honestly, a lot of this stuff just happens and we don't plan for it.
Yeah, because I noticed also too, I mean, it's we obviously don't, I mean, I said we don't really have like an exact time for it. I mean, do you know if this dropped to like right at midnight?
Right at midnight, yeah.
Oh, it did. So would it be midnight New York time, essentially?
I would say, yeah, I think so. That would be.
Yeah. I mean, the only reason why I mention it is just because, I mean, and even without a birth time, anytime the moon is in Leo now, it's going to be opposing Pluto by sign as well, which we just discussed. So those weird sort of power dynamics that she sort of talks about, and like the shadowy relationship stuff, and all, it's like, all of the celebration and partying has like this sort of shadow essentially, which I think is pretty cool. And and again, just like you said, the moon just kind of like the moon kind of triggering like, actually here's the entire album with like the with everything else that was left out. And by the way, I have to say the deluxe album title is so fucking funny to me, like, because it's very clowning of the industry.
Yes, and
like,
it's so self-indulgent.
yes,
Yeah,
totally.
and Leo is so self-indulgent, and I don't say that disrespectfully.
Yeah,
I say that with respect.
exactly. A Leo's gonna Leo, baby. Just let them do it. It's fine.
Born to do.
Yeah,
It's what they were born to do. And with the moon being in Leo at that time, like I mentioned, Brat is commercially very successful, commercially and critically. It's been critically reviewed highly. I think at this point, it's the highest reviewed pop album this year so far.
Wow.
So it's commercially been very successful for Charli XCX and critically. And of course, the Saturn story with that is, when the Deluxe was dropped, she was predicted to debut at #1 in the UK on the Billboard 200. But Taylor Swift beat her out because Taylor Swift is playing the long game, trying to get some big record that I think is held by the Beatles. So again, big monoliths in the industry, right? Big titans, authority figures. And we won't spend too long on that because honestly, I don't think it's that interesting.
I've already kind of worked out my thoughts to it too. It's like, it's actually not that big a deal. It does. I will say, I will say generally, I find like the uber capitalist stuff weird now in the whole Swift camp. It's kind of gross to me at this point. I'm like, I don't know why we need to be doing all this. You know what I mean? Like, but anyway, so what did you have any final thoughts around Deluxe before we talk about Girl So Confusing remix?
No, actually, I think we can move right on into Girl So Confusing.
All right, the moment I have been waiting for. So a lot of the lore around this album, it was funny because I was just learning all of this as I go, which is whenever I have a sort of new pop culture obsession, that is when I truly come alive. All of my Gemini placements really are just so enthralled. And a lot of the lore around one of the songs from the album was Girl So Confusing. Everyone was speculating who it was about. And generally it was good. I think who were in two camps is either like Marina, formerly like Marina and the Diamonds, or Lorde. And so the remix, like a remix of this song came out featuring Lorde, and that was released on June 21st, 2024, like later in the evening. So it would be like 10 or 11 p.m. or something like that. Yeah. So let's talk about it. I mean, I feel like you have more details to fill in around. Actually, I'm gonna let you take it, and then I will fill in because this. And I will say this happened right near a full moon in Capricorn. So, okay, I'm going to let you talk because I feel like I'm missing some important details around the lore of this. I feel like.
Well, the interesting thing when it comes to Lorde and Charli is they did kind of break through and kind of debut around the same time. And at the time too, they did have a very similar look, big hair, dark lipstick, but very different styles sonically and very different subject matters. But they debuted around the same time. They were doing music festivals around the same time too. So obviously they knew about each other. They knew each other and photographed together, I would say relatively frequently. There's a pretty famous interview where someone is interviewing Charli XCX and truly mistakes her for Lorde and asks her, and asks her what her I guess her thoughts were when she wrote I think it was Royals, and Charli rolls with it, and it really turned into like this meme. And she's been compared to Lorde, but they're very different in their levels of success because of course Lorde shifted the pop style after Pure Heroine. It was kind of like there was pop music before Lorde, and then there was pop music after Lorde, right? And the interesting thing about Girl So Confusing is the original song on Brat. There's really been this discussion, and I think it really started last summer with the release of Barbie, of, being a girl's girl and girls supporting girls. And it was like this invigoration of like, I guess just almost this, it felt very like 2010s feminism a little bit.
Sure.
Girls supporting girls, all of this stuff. And again, I don't say that all with some like disdain, like we won't get into, all of that because we could be here for hours.
Yeah.
But I think it really hit like this pitch last summer where it was like, we're all, hey, Barbie, right? And that's kind of been the dominant like thought of like, you should support women. You should be a girl's girl. You shouldn't feel jealous. You shouldn't feel, confrontational. If you do that with another woman, it's like you're kind of seen as like the bad guy a little bit. Like there's something maybe wrong with you a little bit. So I think there is some courage about Girl So Confusing. And I really enjoyed Charli in releasing this track. She said, this is not a diss track. It's not a diss track, right? And Lorde even posted about this album on her Instagram saying she pre-saved it. And Lorde doesn't post a lot on social media, so it was pretty prominent. And again, that connection of like, this is about Lorde. And then when that remix came out around the full moon, on top of that, Lorde is a Capricorn rising and Charli XCX is a Cancer rising. So they both activate each other's birth charts in some very interesting ways, where Charli's ascendant and rising point is in Lorde's first house, and Lorde's ascendant point is in Charli's first house. So there is some sort of dynamic that they both have where there is some push and pull, there is some polarity. And while they are very similar, they do have the same hair, right? As the song, compares them to. There are some key differences between them. Like there are some key differences between the Capricorn archetype and the Cancerian archetype. And producing a song and releasing a song that is a really healthy way to say, hey, we have some issues. I'm sorry that you felt this way. I'm sorry that my self-hatred internalized in you it's such a, it's brave in a way that's, commendable. As somebody that deals with female friendships, and there can be debate on if Lorde and Charli are really friends. Is anybody really friends in the industry, right? Like they are colleagues, they are coworkers in certain ways, but I'm sure there is some closeness there as well. But there is something so intense about having to confront people that you're friends with. Personally, I don't deal with that because I like to. I think there is a lot of anxiety in confronting people, and especially in friendships. I think friend breakups, like some people just don't touch it. So there's something commendable about doing it and working it out on the remix, right?
Yeah. And I mean, like just even looking at Charli's moon being in Virgo in the third house, like,
they're both Virgo moons.
Yes. And actually it really closely conjunct each other as well. But just that thing of overthinking something, especially if your third house can represent siblings and like neighbors, and also just people in your like sort of daily environment. And I also noticed as well, so Charli's seventh house has Uranus and Neptune.
Yes, for not being aware, not understanding, and being confused. Girl So Confusing.
Just
on where she stands with this person.
Exactly, like Neptune representing confusion, that nebulous energy, just in her seventh house of partnerships. I just think is so fascinating.
Very close to Lorde's ascendant point, by the way. Like very close.
Yes. So Lorde's ascendant is 13 degrees of Capricorn. And it is, so Lorde's ascendant would be conjunct Charli's Neptune and Uranus. So we have both the nebulous, I'm not sure if I'm being deceived by this person or where I stand with this person. And then also with the Uranus here of like the sudden, like, here I am, or like sudden like reversals, essentially. Yeah. exactly. So, but also we have Lord's Jupiter would be conjunct those same points as well. So there's almost like this, I know, like beneficial, side to it, or this more like forgiving, kind of energy. Yeah. And both of their Jupiters are trying each other, as well. So, but just the striking. This is why I get excited about astrology, is because you don't have to hunt for it in this case. I mean, the song came out on the first of 2 full moons in Capricorn. So that would be in Charli's 7th house of relationships, where everyone is speculating on. It's activating Lord's 1st house of self, in Capricorn. And Lord's been kind of dormant, I mean, for a while too.
Yeah, sensual power. Yeah.
Yeah. I think Lorde might also be, let me work out, I think she might be a 7 life path too, if I remember correctly as well. Let me look at that really quick, because that would be 7 plus 7 plus. Yeah, she's a 7 life path as well. So, I mean, like, I've noticed my 7s tend to be kind of my more underground girlies. Like, it's, I'm not saying every 7 life path is the same. And like, I'm gonna box everybody in, but there does tend to be a private side to 7 energy. So just her sort of suddenly being in the spotlight, on this full moon, on I think one of like the best tracks of the year. Yeah, because like it is a relentless bop, and the beat just does not let up, and it speaks to really resonant subject matter that is not really talked about that often. We could talk about like, because about female relationships, but also like in gay world or in queer world, like there are some sort of overlaps of like, you see someone out and you're not really sure if you're friends or not, but like you hang out at, like those sort of weird in between kind of things. And it made me emotional listening to it, but also just like, man, it's just a bop. Like,
I cried through the tears.
Absolutely.
There is just something, so when you are in a liminal space with a person that you felt so confident in your relationship with at some point, it's weird because you don't, again, it's like, should I touch it? Should I not? Are we going to change this dynamic? Is it going to end? Is it going to grow? And that's kind of the fear and the fogginess when it comes to Neptune and Uranus when they come together. It's like you have that choice to either stay in the unknown or to break through the fog a little bit. I do also want to mention that Charli's moon is right on top of Lord's midheaven.
I was the last thing I was going to mention too, like bringing that into the public consciousness or one's career, essentially. Yeah. So like, and I think they're probably going to be publicly linked together professionally for a very long time,
Yeah. And they were by other people, but now it's like they're kind of speaking on the link a little bit more, putting pen to paper, on a song, which is different than just kind of going in interviews and taking pictures together and kind of having an inside joke and fan base in their fan bases respectively. The other thing I do want to mention is both of them have their sun and Mercury square each other.
Yes, that was my other point, was the differences in temperament, essentially, but nevertheless being very dynamically kind of like linked together, because Lorde is Scorpio. Mm-hmm. She has, again, with Capricorn rising and moon in Virgo. And I mean, I talk a lot about the modalities, and just like when I'm teaching astrology and what have you, like people often associate like the elements together, but like Taurus, Leo, Scorpio, Aquarius, all different temperaments, but they're all fixed signs, Exactly. So there is this like, there's this like, you could say like determination or like this persistence. They all fall in like the middle of a season. So these things, I don't know, it just, and it's not even a sign by square too. It's like mathematically pretty close,
Right.
So yeah, anyway, sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, it's great. You picked up on something that I want to talk about when it comes to modalities and to the like fixedness of both of their Sun and Mercury's. It's like while they have been compared to one another, both in looks, sonically very different, and career-wise very different. And just because something in astrology is squaring something else, and I know we'd like to talk about the squares as being difficult aspects. They are, because it is, associated with confrontation, with tension. But that's how you get movement. So putting, again, saying it's okay that we're in two different lanes. It's okay that we have these disagreements. We're going to name them. We're going to work through it, and we're going to make something together. Even if it's kind of like a meeting of the minds in this case, where it's like Lorde and Charli, again, you really can't get too like different. Like if you compare melodrama to like, I don't want to compare it to Brat because it came out at very different times. But if you compare both of the two albums, a Lorde and Charli album, it's like you're getting two different experiences. Jack Antonoff was running the show for a little bit too long there.
Speaking of someone who I just never want to hear his name again, I'm just like, he needs to go.
Well, Lorde did announce that she's releasing new music soon, and I believe she has a different producer. I can't remember off the top of my head. I will say I won't go too far into it. Solar Power, I need to listen to it again. It needs to grow on me a little bit more, but it wasn't my favorite, but that's okay.
Yeah, same.
Not everything is for me. Not everything is for me, and that's okay. But Girl So Confusing was such a beautiful moment. And I do want to say, while it was very close to the Capricorn moon, I think technically on release, the moon was still in Sagittarius. And I want to point this out, not to call you out, okay? Not to call you out, because it was still building up to the Capricorn moon. I say this because that means the moon, Charli's chart ruler, was in her 6th house of coworkers. Lorde is essentially a coworker. I mean, you can still be friends with your coworkers. I mean, I have my son in my 6th house. Most of my friends are my coworkers.
That would also be tremendously close to her North Node as well, too, if it was in like the really later degrees. That's a really good point. I know. Why do I know? Why do I know somebody's 6th house sun Sagittarius is? I don't know. Anyway,
there's something in your chart that's like a magnet. That's Leos and Scorpio moons. It's like and Sagittarius risings. I attract a lot of them in my life, and I love. The one thing I will say too is, if it was really close to her, that would be her North Node in Sagittarius, later degrees, pretty close to the galactic center, which around 27 degrees of Sagittarius. And I point this out. Galactic center is essentially, the center of our universe. It's a supermassive black hole, and it's associated with almost like collective knowledge, and like true like knowledge, divine knowledge. And I like to point this out because Girl So Confusing just reached so many people's minds and so many different levels of relationships, of friendships, and it really felt so relatable in a way that I haven't seen a song hit so many people all at once before. And I think that's just it felt like a universal truth in a way. And again, I think it just is something so special. You don't get songs like this that often, that are kind of darker subject matters too, but so poignant.
Yeah, I mean, and also it just completely slaps. Like it just is such I mean, like, and the subject matter makes it even just go that much harder. But I had a visceral reaction to hearing Lorde's vocal on a beat like that, because I haven't heard her like that in a long time, if not ever. So I hope I get more.
Yeah, no, seriously, it felt like Liability, but just with a club beat in the background. It was great.
Yeah.
It was great. I was like, I need to listen to melodrama. Right
I know.
now.
I know.
And I did.
It makes me need to go back into actually both of their discographies because again, I'm like kind of like to the game with Charli. Lorde, I've like listened to some, like obviously was into Pure Heroine, but and somewhat into Solar Power. I haven't been super into it, but now I'm like, I need to go. I'm fully like, I'm fully invested. I'm also interested to see what the second full moon in Capricorn is going to, how that's gonna play with either.
Yeah, with this chart.
Yeah. So
Part of me thinks that we might get something from Lorde. Maybe she announced, excuse me, since she announced some new music, we perhaps might get some new music, or some more. The other thing that I could think of is this kind of behind the scenes stuff, tour announcements, maybe more tour dates if more tour dates are announced. She's going on tour with Troye Sivan. It's pretty late in the game to add shows, but I know there was a lot of talk earlier in the spring that this tour wasn't selling as quickly. So I could see there be news of people buying tickets, those arenas getting full because of this album rollout, which again, and that's tied into that Capricorn full moon, but also that Cancer new moon that's happening in a number of days.
Well, Lorde's midheaven is like pretty. Lorde has a 25. I mean, well, yeah. I don't know. Actually, I don't have a complete thought with that at all, to be honest. But I will be one of the later ticket purchasers because I was not going to go to this tour, but I am fully like cannot fucking wait.
The sad thing is I'm having to like bully my friends, a few of them to go with me. Yeah. Some of my friends, like we have very different music tastes. I'm like, I don't like it that way. And I'm like, will for me, God damn it.
Well, you will be supporting me.
Come on. But we'll see. Didn't make it to the Crash World Tour.
Yeah.
I'm gonna try and get to this one.
I feel like you definitely need to be going to this one. I feel like of any of these. Yeah. I guess any final thoughts before we wrap up, and also do you have anything you like want to promote and like what platforms you on and all that kind of stuff? Because you are not open for consultations at this moment, correct?
At this moment, I am not. Hopefully you can follow me on TikTok, on Instagram at Glitzbit. If you are interested in booking a reading in the future, I do hope to open back up for consultations soon, but I do have a full-time job outside of being an astrologer and just a girl on the internet. So the nonprofit world is nonprofiting, and I am really but if you would like to keep up with me, Glitzbit on TikTok and on Instagram, although I'm more active on TikTok, especially for all of my Jujutsu Kaisen lovers. The last thing I will say is justice for Apple. Apple is such a bop, and I don't understand why so many people are just sleeping on Apple. I love that song.
I'm a latecomer to it. Okay, so I gotta say personally, me on my Brat journey, I will get. I tend to get fixated on a song and repeat it over and over and over until I crush it to the ground and never want to hear it again in my life. And that has been a lot. And that's been a lot of the tracks on it for me. I was like, because again, I was just like 360 for like a week, and then it was Von Dutch. So I'm like, fully kind of still getting into the whole album because it's not been like a playthrough for me. Like I'll just get very hooked on something, but Apple is kind of next because I know that felt like the underrated kind of bop people were talking about, and then this came out and I feel like overshadowed it a little bit, at least for me.
So good. Apple is so good, of course, followed by Mean Girls, but Von Dutch, especially the Addison Rae remix. I'm not an Addison Rae lover, but I heard her on that and I was like, this is making me rethink.
Yeah.
Is it?
I've kind of come around a little bit because her Addison Rae's EP was low key like there's some bops on there. You know what I mean? So anyway, not that I'm welcoming her with open arms, but I'm less unfriendly. I'm like, okay,
yes,
this is like
I'm curious. Yes, why not?
Yes, yes, exactly. Well, thank you so much for talking to me. This was so much fun. And
this was a lot of fun.
This is just like truly lovely. So please everyone go follow Glitzbit if you want some more extra stuff from her. And thanks for listening. And I don't have anything else to say about me. So I will see you all next time. Thanks for listening, everybody.